Hello, welcome back to another update, and today I want to talk a little bit about gearboxes. So the engine I've put onto the bench, I've bolted it down at about the right angle for how it will go in the bike, and I fitted the other manifold that I've got that probably is a bit more appropriate because the car will be behind the engine, out towards the back of the bike, and it's next to the gearbox that I plan to use on the bench. I say, well, I plan to use it at the moment, but there's one or two things that need to be worked out, so it may not be the gearbox that finally gets used. If you're really observant, you'll see my reflection in the window. Hello, give you a quick wave. And that's how I make these videos, just with a mobile phone. So the gearbox on the right, I think proportionally doesn't look too bad. It is quite a big box, but compared to the size of the engine, it doesn't look sort of out of place. And you can see what the original plan was to drive the torque converter or fluid flywheel, whatever you want to call it, from a Toyota IQ car gearbox, from a tooth belt from the side of the engine. So that was a plan, but I think there's one or two things that need a little bit more thought around this box. So the box is off a Toyota IQ car. This is a bell housing. You can see here, obviously the engine would be where my hand is now, and the flywheel would drive the torque converter, which is this thing here. So obviously I'd need some kind of bearing and some support from this side, because you'd need that with a pulley to drive it, and I probably would lose a bit of the bell housing, perhaps cut that off around there, because you don't need all of this. So the way the gearbox works in the car is that the torque converter then drives the gear section, which is across here, and that's got a pair of coned continuously variable transmission pulleys. So it's a CVT box, but it's quite clever, because instead of having an infinitely variable transmission like on a moped, governed by sort of springs and centrifugal force, there are a few I guess clever servos relays inside here. So the two cones go between 3 or 4 specific ratios, so it gives you the impression of having 3 or 4 gears when you're driving the car. And that's done. There's quite a few sensors on the side. I don't know if you can see, there's a pickup there, there's one down there, there's one there, there's one there, there's another couple, there's one on the top there, there's one around the side. So there's a lot of sensors, and that means there'll be a fair bit of wiring to do, a lot of connectors, and that's quite difficult to make look pretty on a custom bike. I'm sure the casing will clean up no problem. It'll end up looking nice and shiny like the engine. So the grime I'm not too concerned about, but it's all the wiring and the sensors and all of these lugs where obviously things were mounted in the car that I'm not going to need. So there's a fair bit of cleaning up to do. The output then comes through to the front here. There's a little transfer gear, and then there's a differential on the front, and the differential then drives the 2 half shafts to drive the car. So one comes out this way, one comes out that way. So that means I've got the option of driving the rear wheel via a chain on either side of the bike, or on both sides of the bike. And if I really wanted to, I could use different sprocket sizes on each side of the bike, just to really mess with people's heads, because that's kind of what it's about, is not to just do something that's easy, but to do something that really makes people scratch their heads and think, well, how does that work then? The problem I've got with this is that I'm reasonably, so if anybody knows different, please let me know, that reasonably certain that this is on the left hand side of the car as you're sitting in it. So that means the engine is on the right hand side of the car, which means that is the front of the car. And if that's the front of the car, the driving wheels want to be going that way to drive forward, which means it makes sense for the entire gearbox, all of the CVT and the torque converter, to rotate in that direction. There is a reverse gear in here, but the driven part of the gearbox would be in that clockwise direction. Now the front of the bike will be that way, so you want the rear wheel to drive anti-clockwise as we're looking at it. The engine will be turning anti-clockwise as we're looking at it, but torque converters don't work really well. In fact, I'm not even sure they work at all in the opposite direction. There's all kinds of voodoo black magic in there, but they're the sort of curved vanes and stators and rotors and all kinds of stuff that I don't fully understand, but I'm fairly sure that if you run them backwards, you won't get the same effect. So that means that instead of running a tooth belt on the pulley, I'd have to run gears to reverse the direction, which means a gearbox, quite tight tolerances, lubrication, and it might look a bit of a mess. So there's a bit of a rethink going on. So either I'm wrong and I've got the direction of rotation incorrect, in which case we've got a reasonable chance of success, or I've got the direction of rotation correct and it's going to give me a bit of a headache. That's what you get by talking to mates when you're a bit drunk, and then coming up with a plan and buying something on eBay without a bit more research. But it just goes to show that I don't have all the answers, and some things do take a bit of thought. So it might come good, it might be the final solution, we're not sure at this point, but I just wanted to put something out there as a bit of an update. So there we go. Any thoughts or suggestions? I'd love to hear them. Cheers.